You are small, even for a human. Do you really think that armor can save you?
Size isn't everything.
The tribunal chamber of the Kryvax Dominion was built to remind every visitor of their place in the galaxy. Black marble floors stretched beneath towering columns etched with the conquests of 1,000 years. And at the center of it all stood General Threxian Vall, 7 feet of armored muscle, commander of the 3rd Reptilian Legion, victor of 42 campaigns. He was not used to being summoned for something as trivial as this. "This," he said, his voice a low rumble that echoed through the chamber, "is the specimen you wanted me to evaluate?" Sergeant Elena Voss stood alone in the center of the room. No weapon, no armor beyond a simple gray uniform. Just a woman, barely over 5.5 feet tall, standing perfectly still while an alien 3 times her size looked down at her like she was an insect that had wandered into the wrong building. The Kryvax Science Council had spent 6 months studying humanity's supposed combat potential after first contact. The reports had been inconsistent. Some said humans were fragile. Others claimed impossible endurance. General Vall had read both and believed neither. Sensors show baseline human musculature is 30% weaker than Kryvax standard, he said, circling her slowly. Bone density, inferior. Reflexes, average. And yet your species claims to be some kind of galactic threat. Elena said nothing. She simply watched him. The silence irritated him more than any insult could have. "Nothing to say?" Vall asked. "No boasting? No threats? I was told humans loved to talk before they die." "You're not going to kill me," Elena said quietly. "You're going to shake my hand. Tell your council I failed the evaluation, and go back to pretending your empire understands what it just invited into its borders." A ripple of tension went through the gathered officers. Nobody spoke to a general like that. Not even other generals. Vall's mandibles flared, the closest thing his species had to a smile. "Confidence. I respect that, even in something so small." He turned to the council observing from the balcony above. Let the record show the human specimen was cooperative and calm during evaluation. Then, almost as an afterthought, he reached out and gripped her wrist. It wasn't meant to hurt her. Not really. It was meant to demonstrate strength, the difference between predator and prey, between conqueror and conquered. His grip alone could crush Duracrete. He simply wanted her to feel, for 1 second, exactly how outmatched she was. What he didn't expect was for her wrist not to break. What he really didn't expect was for her hand to move. It happened faster than his sensors could track. Later, the footage would need to be slowed down 11 times before anyone in the chamber could actually see what occurred. Elena's free hand came up, caught his forearm at the joint, and twisted. There was a sound like a support beam snapping under a collapsing building. General Threxian Vall, hero of 42 campaigns, conqueror of 6 star systems, screamed. He dropped to one knee, his arm armored, augmented, supposedly unbreakable, bent at an angle that armor was never designed to bend. The chamber went utterly silent except for his ragged breathing and the faint hum of the overhead lights. Elena Voss stood exactly where she had been standing before. She hadn't moved her feet. She hadn't raised her voice. She simply looked down at the general kneeling in front of her, cradling a limb that would need 3 surgeries and 8 months to fully repair. "You said humans were 30% weaker," she said calmly. "That number's about muscle fiber density. It doesn't measure leverage. It doesn't measure joint mechanics. And it definitely doesn't measure the fact that your armor was rated to stop plasma fire, not torque." She crouched slightly, meeting his pained gaze. "We're not strong because our muscles are big, General. We're strong because we've spent our entire evolutionary history fighting things bigger than us and figuring out exactly where they break." The council above erupted into chaos. Some standing in shock, others frantically calling for medical teams. A few simply staring in disbelief at the footage replaying on their monitors. This was supposed to be a routine evaluation, a formality, proof that humanity's reputation among the newly contacted species was exaggeration and propaganda. Instead, the most decorated general in the Kryvax military was on the floor of his own tribunal chamber, disarmed, quite literally, by a woman half his size who hadn't even needed a weapon. Medical drones descended, stabilizing the general's arm as two junior officers helped him to a chair. He refused to look away from Elena the entire time, his predator instincts warring with something new. Something he hadn't felt directed at another species in decades. Respect. And underneath it, something colder. Fear. Where? He finally managed through gritted mandibles. Did you learn to do that? Elena allowed herself the smallest smile. Boxing gym in Detroit. Age 12. Then the Marines. Then 11 years of hand-to-hand combat training designed by people who studied every martial arts system on a planet that's been at war with itself for 10,000 years. She paused, letting that sink in. You've been fighting other species for 1,000 years, General. We've been fighting each other for 10 times that long. And somewhere in there, we got very, very good at figuring out how to hurt things stronger than us. The council chamber had gone from chaos to something closer to stunned silence. High Counselor Retha's mech, who had authorized this evaluation as a mere formality before humanity's official border designation, stood frozen at the balcony rail. 6 months of intelligence reports had told him humans were manageable, predictable, a species to be catalogued and controlled, like every other race the Dominion had absorbed into its borders. Nobody had mentioned this. Sergeant Voss, Retha said carefully, his translator crackling slightly. Was this representative of standard human combat capability? Elena looked up at him. I'm not even in the top percentile back home, Counselor. I got picked for this mission because I was available, not because I was exceptional. The silence that followed was heavier than anything that had come before it. General Vall, still cradling his shattered arm, let out a low, pained laugh. It wasn't mockery this time. It was the sound of a warrior recognizing, for the first time in his long career, that he had badly misjudged an opponent, and that the mistake had nearly cost him more than just an arm. 42 campaigns, he muttered. 42 victories against species twice our size, 3 times our firepower. And I nearly died to something that looks like it should be serving refreshments at a diplomatic banquet. You didn't nearly die, General? Elena said, stepping back and finally allowing her posture to relax. If I wanted you dead, you would be. I broke your arm because you grabbed me first, and because your council needed to see exactly what they were dealing with before they made a mistake they couldn't take back. She turned to address the balcony directly, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. Counselors, when your scouts first found Earth, they classified it as a death world. Volatile weather, predator-dense ecosystems, constant tectonic activity. You noted it as a hazard, not an opportunity. What you didn't account for is that every single human being alive today is descended from ancestors who survived that world. Not the strongest ones, not the biggest ones, the smartest ones, the ones who found the leverage point when the raw numbers said they shouldn't win. She looked back down at General Vall, still catching his breath in the chair. So the next time you want to test what humanity is capable of, General, I'd recommend not grabbing us first. Nobody in that chamber ever forgot those words. Within a week, the footage, heavily redacted, but still deeply unsettling to anyone who watched it, had circulated through the upper levels of Dominion Command. Within a month, humanity's border classification had been quietly upgraded from manageable species to handle with extreme diplomatic caution, and General Threxian Vall, once known across the Dominion as the Unbreakable, spent the rest of his career telling a very different story to every young officer under his command. The most dangerous thing in this galaxy, he would tell them, holding up his rebuilt arm as proof, isn't the species with the biggest guns or the thickest hide. It's the one that spent 10,000 years learning exactly where everything breaks. And somewhere, light years away, on a small blue planet the Dominion had once dismissed as insignificant, humanity kept training, kept preparing, kept getting ready for a galaxy that had no idea what it had just woken up.